Big weekend in the SEC, and it's always a big weekend here for college football talk here at the Voice of College Football, of course. And Steve Merrill stops by every Thursday to provide analysis. So we hope you're jumping from channel to channel to check out those segments. We're going to run through the SEC schedule, but of course, make it on over to wagertalk.com to check out Steve's complete work on college football and the NFL. Bama, Texas A&M, Steve, has gone down to the final play of the game the last 2 years. And, of course, Bama has been much more successful during this series since A&M joined the SEC at 12-3. But A&M brings a ton of talent, of course. They've got that home field advantage. And Bama is a slim favorite at Kyle Field.
Yeah, slim to say the least, though. This line opened 3.5. The look-ahead line, by the way, months ago was as high as 7 over a touchdown. It opens 3.5 Sunday night into Monday. It's now down to -1, but as we head closer to the weekend, I'm actually starting to see some pick'ems. I don't know if A&M will go off as a favorite, but this line definitely might be a pick'em by kickoff. Bama holding on is about a 1-point favorite now as we look at the Wager Talk live odds screen late in the week. And the total has really dropped as well. Opened 50 down to 46.5. Obviously, the quarterback concerns with A&M, but yet the money is coming in on A&M. So I think that's some sharp action on A&M and the under. It's down to 46 actually in a lot of spots. And I agree with it. My database 10,000 game simulation has A&M winning on average outright by 1 point and has them outgaining Alabama and winning outright in many other projections I do as well. So still +1s. So I guess we can call them a live dog, but I like A&M, a really good defensive team. And there's still concerns about Alabama's offense. And they've been a very mediocre team on the road the last several years, and their offense looks weaker this year. So I think there's some reasons A&M could win this game.
Steve, Kentucky passed its first test of the season after 4 easy wins. So they took out Florida as just like a 1-point favorite at home and really dominated that game. 330 yards rushing in that game against the Gators. They go to Georgia. We know what the deal is with Georgia. They have yet to cover a spread, I believe. But hey, on the field where it counts, they're 5-0 as they march toward a possible three-peat. 14.5-point favorites struggled on the road, barely beat Auburn with a late touchdown. Similar situation against South Carolina. And here we have another similarly talented Kentucky team to South Carolina and Auburn taking on Georgia as about a 2-touchdown underdog.
Yeah, I mean, Georgia's been over a 40-point favorite in 3 of their 5 games, so they won those by 28 or more each time. They didn't cover any of them, as you mentioned. But the 2 games that were somewhat competitive, they only win by 10 as a 4-touchdown favorite against South Carolina, almost 26, almost a 4-touchdown favorite. They win by 10. And then last week, they were a 2-touchdown favorite at Auburn. They only win by 7. But then again, that was a tough game. Had over 400 yards of offense and had a 2-1 turnover disadvantage and still won the game. It is a bit concerning that they allowed Auburn to run for 219 rushing yards. That's not something we normally see from Georgia. And on the season now, even with some of those weak opponents, they're allowing 4 yards per carry. So I do think the Georgia D on the rush side is weaker, but the pass defense has been lights out. Kentucky does run the ball well. So it's from a matchup perspective, it's interesting. But I do think Kentucky gets behind in this game, and I think they're going to have trouble throwing the ball when they do. And because of the no coverage so far, as you mentioned, we actually get some line value now. This line opened 15. It's down to 14.5. My database simulation, 10,000 games, has Georgia on average winning by 19.5 points. So let's see if it hits that key number of 14. Either way, I think there's some value now with Georgia.
Steve, folks might be more interested in the over-under concerning our next 2 games because Ole Miss and LSU put over 100 points on the board. Let's see, 55-49 in quite a battle in Oxford. Ole Miss taking on Arkansas this week. The Hogs lost by 12 against Texas A&M. Weren't in that game really in the second half. So we've got Arkansas taking on Ole Miss.
Yeah, this is a tough one because the spread's around 11.5. My database projection, 10,000 simulations, has Ole Miss winning on average by over 15 points. Yet, I'd be very careful because the way they won last week, not only was it a straight-up dog win against LSU, but as you said, a back-and-forth, 104 points scored. Those are the type of games that can leave you a little bit hungover. Good news for Ole Miss is they do have a bye on deck next week. I'm not sure they're going to be necessarily factoring that into their endurance this week, but they do have something to look forward to next week, and maybe they can go all out one more week and get it done. So the line value is with Ole Miss. The situation concerns me, though. Problem is, I don't know what to do with Arkansas. They're off of 3 straight losses now, and they've struggled at times defensively, especially against the pass. That's going to be bad news for an Ole Miss team that's averaging over 10 yards per pass attempt this year.
Missouri's the type team, Steve, that isn't going to wow anyone statistically or in any of the advanced metrics, but they're undefeated at 5-0. They had a magical 61-yard field goal, an SEC record, defeat Kansas State in the final play of the game a few weeks ago. And they're taking on an LSU team that, bam, could be hung over as well. Really focus on some other games in the SEC Western Division. And suddenly this Missouri team is a team that they're going to have to reckon with. So we got LSU taking on Mizzou.
Yeah, of the two letdown spots between Mississippi and LSU, I think it's more likely here for LSU for a couple reasons. First of all, Ole Miss gets to stay at home, and they have that bye on deck against technically a weaker opponent. This is, I think, a much tougher spot for LSU for several reasons. First of all, I think the hangover is more likely when you lose a high-scoring game 55-49 because you're devastated, whereas Ole Miss might have a little motivation, momentum. So LSU's the team coming off the loss in that shootout, so I think that's a negative. And they're on the road against a very good defensive team in Missouri. And Missouri's actually been surprisingly good offensively as well. Almost 7 yards per play. LSU's been explosive offensively, but they've been below average defensively. They're giving up over 6.5 yards per play, 31 points a game, 5 yards per carry on the ground. Average against the pass, 8 yards per pass allowed. So Missouri can move the ball offensively. We're getting the better defensive team as a home dog, undefeated home dog, with a perennially good underdog head coach as well. And LSU's a road favorite on top of that off the loss. So I think of the two situations, LSU probably more likely to have the letdown than maybe Ole Miss.
Steve is gracious enough to stop by every Thursday, and we record these segments for all the team channels, so check him out. Also, he delivers his under-the-radar selection for us, exclusive to the Voice of College Football. So if you become a channel member on the main channel or on Patreon, patreon.com/MarkRogersTV, you get Steve's under-the-radar selection each and every week, 16-2 against the spread. All right, Steve, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks, Mark.